In the last 7.5 months of his life, Elvis Presley was prescribed over 5,300 pills by his personal physician. Toxicology reports after his death found at least 10 different prescription drugs in his system, several at significant levels. Some dosages were reportedly many times the recommended therapeutic amount. His body was dealing with a staggering chemical load on a daily basis. Number 6. Placidyl, ethchlorvinol, the short-term sleep aid that lingered. You might not have heard of Placidyl as much as some others on this list, but it was definitely part of the mix. Placidyl, the brand name for ethchlorvinol, was a sedative-hypnotic drug. Think of it like a sleeping pill. It was prescribed back then for short-term treatment of insomnia. Short-term being the key phrase. What did it do? Basically, it calmed down your brain activity to help you drift off. It kicked in relatively quickly, usually within 15 to 30 minutes, and its effects were meant to last about 5 hours. It wasn't a barbiturate or a benzodiazepine. It was kind of in its own class. Doctors liked it for a while because they thought it might be less risky than barbiturates, which were notorious for overdose potential. But Placidyl had its own dark side. It could be habit-forming, meaning people could become dependent on it to sleep. Taking it for longer than recommended wasn't a great idea. Side effects could include dizziness, nausea, blurred vision, low blood pressure, and that dreaded hangover effect the next day, feeling groggy and out of it. Doesn't sound ideal if you need to be sharp and ready to perform, right? Now connect this to Elvis. The man famously struggled with sleep. His schedule was often upside down, performing late, winding down in the early hours, trying to sleep during the day. Insomnia became a constant battle. So a sleeping pill, like Placidyl, would seem like a solution. Reports and testimonies indicate that Placidyl was among the cocktail of drugs Elvis was taking, particularly in his later years. Imagine needing something just to get a few hours of rest. Then imagine that something has side effects that make you feel less than great when you wake up. Maybe you need something else to counteract that grogginess. You can start to see how a cycle might begin. Placidyl, like many sedatives, carries risks, especially when mixed with other substances that depress the central nervous system, things like alcohol or other sleeping pills or painkillers. Combining these could drastically slow down breathing and heart rate. That's a dangerous game. Toxicology reports following Elvis's death detected ethchlorvinol, Placidyl, in his system. It wasn't necessarily at the astronomical levels of some other drugs found, but its presence contributed to the overall picture of polypharmacy, the use of multiple drugs simultaneously. It was another layer, another chemical interaction happening within his body. Think about the cumulative effect. One sleeping pill might be manageable, though still with risks. But add it to another sedative, maybe a painkiller, maybe something for anxiety, each one adding its own potential side effects and interactions. Placidyl was one ingredient in that complex and ultimately overwhelming chemical soup. It represented the desperate search for sleep, using a medication with its own set of potential problems, adding another piece to the puzzle of the substances affecting the king's health and well-being in his final years. It wasn't the main headliner drug, perhaps, but it was definitely on the bill. The drug itself has mostly faded from use now, replaced by medications, generally considered safer, though all sleeping aids have risks. But in the 1970s, it was available, it was prescribed, and it found its way into Elvis's nightly regimen, adding one more chemical burden to a body already struggling under the weight of numerous potent medications. It was another helper that came with a hidden cost. Number 5. Valium diazepam. The little blue pill that became a constant. Valium. Even the name sounds calm, right? Introduced in the early 1960s, Valium, generic name diazepam, quickly became one of the most prescribed drugs in the world. It was marketed as a wonder drug for anxiety, muscle spasms, seizures, and sometimes even insomnia. It belongs to a class of drugs called benzodiazepines, or benzos. How does it work? In simple terms, Valium enhances the effect of a natural chemical in the brain called GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. ABA is like the brain's brake pedal. It calms down nerve activity. So, more GABA effect equals more calm, less anxiety, relaxation. Sounds pretty good, especially if you are dealing with stress, pressure, or the inability to unwind. And Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, definitely dealt with pressure. The demands of fame, the grueling performance schedules, the lack of privacy, the health issues, it all piled up. Anxiety was reportedly a significant issue. Valium would seem like a logical prescription to help manage that. Reports and accounts from those close to Elvis, as well as prescription records discussed during investigations and trials involving his doctor, suggest that Valium use became substantial, particularly in the 1970s. It wasn't just an occasional pill for a stressful day. It seems to have become a regular part of his medication regimen. Some sources claim he took it multiple times a day. Valium, especially in higher doses or with long-term use, isn't without its problems. Common side effects include drowsiness, fatigue, muscle weakness, and dizziness. It can impair coordination and judgment. Think about trying to perform high-energy karate moves on stage while feeling drowsy or unsteady. Not ideal. There's also the issue of tolerance and dependence. The body can get used to Valium, meaning that over time a person might need higher doses to achieve the same effect. Stopping it abruptly after long-term use can lead to withdrawal symptoms, increased anxiety, insomnia, tremors, and in severe cases, seizures. This dependence can make it incredibly difficult to stop taking the drug. And crucially, like Placidyl and other sedatives, Valium doesn't play well with others. Mixing it with alcohol, coax, painkillers, or other sedatives dramatically increases the risk of dangerous side effects, particularly severe drowsiness and respiratory depression, slowed or stopped breathing. This is a critical point. Elvis wasn't just taking Valium. He was often taking it alongside a host of other powerful drugs. When investigators looked into Elvis's death, Valium diazepam was one of the drugs found in his system through toxicology tests. Its presence indicated recent use and added to the overall burden of central nervous system depressants he had ingested. Consider the context of his life in those final years. Reports of slurred speech during concerts, appearing drowsy or disoriented, needing help on and off stage. While many factors contributed, the sedating effects of drugs, like Valium, likely played a role in these observable issues. It was prescribed to help him cope, to calm the anxiety, but its pervasive use, especially in combination with other substances, added another layer to the complex health challenges he faced. Valium was ubiquitous, seen as relatively safe at the time compared to older drugs like barbiturates, and prescribed freely for a wide range of issues. For someone like Elvis, seeking relief from the immense pressures and physical discomforts he experienced, it became another go-to medication. But its seemingly benign reputation masked the real risks associated with high doses, long-term use, and dangerous combinations. It was another thread in the tapestry of prescription medications that characterized his later life. Number 4. Quaaludes, methaqualone, the infamous ludes, for winding down. Quaaludes. The name itself evokes the 1970s. Known chemically as methaqualone, Quaaludes were incredibly popular as a recreational drug, but they started out as a prescription medication. They were introduced as a sedative and hypnotic, basically a sleeping pill, and were initially thought to be a safer alternative to barbiturates. Oh, the irony. What did Quaaludes do? Like other sedatives, they depressed the central nervous system. Users often described the feeling as a relaxed, euphoric drowsiness, sometimes accompanied by a tingling sensation. They were meant to help people fall asleep and stay asleep. At lower doses, they could reduce anxiety. Why were they so popular recreationally? They gained a reputation for lowering inhibitions and supposedly having aphrodisiac qualities, though this was more anecdotal than scientific. They became a staple at parties and nightclubs. But this recreational use highlighted their potential for abuse and addiction. Elvis again struggled mightily with sleep and unwinding after the adrenaline rush of performing. Finding something to shut off his brain and allow him rest was a constant quest. Quaaludes entered the picture as another tool for this purpose. Testimonies and records indicate that methaqualone was one of the drugs prescribed to Elvis, part of the rotation of sedatives used to manage his chronic insomnia. But Quaaludes were notoriously tricky. The line between a dose that induced sleep and a dose that caused a dangerous overdose was thinner than with some other drugs. Taking too much could lead to delirium, seizures, hyperthermia, coma, and respiratory arrest, stopping breathing. And the danger amplified significantly when mixed with alcohol or other depressants. This combination drastically increased the risk of overdose and death. Given Elvis's documented use of multiple sedatives and painkillers, adding Quaaludes to the mix was like adding fuel to an already smoldering fire. Side effects, even at prescribed doses, could include dizziness, hangover sensations, fatigue, and impaired motor skills. Dependence was a major issue, and withdrawal could be severe, involving anxiety, insomnia, tremors, and potentially dangerous convulsions. By the mid to late 1970s, the dangers of Quaaludes were becoming increasingly apparent to regulators and the medical community. Their potential for abuse far outweighed their therapeutic benefits in many cases. They started becoming more tightly controlled. Toxicology reports after Elvis's death confirmed the presence of methaqualone in his system. It was another piece of the polypharmacy puzzle. Its presence showed that even as awareness of its dangers grew, it was still accessible to him and part of his regimen. Think about the sheer number of different sleeping aids Elvis was reportedly trying or using concurrently: Placidyl, Valium, sometimes used for sleep, barbiturates like Nembutal or Carbital, also reportedly used at times, and Quaaludes. This wasn't about finding the one right medication. It suggests a desperate search for relief. Cycling through or combining powerful drugs, each with its own risks and side effects, Quaaludes, with their infamous reputation and genuine dangers, represented a significant risk factor. Their presence in his system underscored the complexity and hazard level of the drug combinations he was consuming. They were part of the nightly ritual aimed at achieving oblivion, a temporary escape from insomnia and perhaps other pressures, but carrying the constant threat of profound sedation and respiratory depression, especially when taken alongside the other potent drugs found in his system. They were a product of their time, a symbol of risky pharmacological solutions, and a contributor to the overall chemical burden Elvis carried. Number 3. Codeine, more than just a cough, syrup, ingent. Codeine might sound less alarming than Quaaludes or Demerol. Many people encounter it in prescription cough syrups, or as a combination pain reliever like Tylenol Pound 3. It's an opiate derived from opium or synthesized from morphine, but it's generally considered less potent than morphine or drugs like Demerol and Dilaudid. What's it used for? Primarily, codeine is prescribed to treat mild to moderate pain, and also to suppress coughs. It works by binding to opioid receptors in the brain and spinal cord, blocking pain signals and also affecting the cough reflex center in the brain. So why is it significant in Elvis's story? Because despite being weaker than some other pobies, codeine was found at very high concentrations in Elvis's body after his death. Some reports suggested the level was potentially toxic on its own, let alone in combination with everything else. How did this happen? Codeine was reportedly one of the painkillers prescribed to Elvis for various ailments. He suffered from a range of painful conditions, including dental problems, requiring extensive work, digestive issues like an impacted colon, eye problems, glaucoma, and possibly general aches and pains from years of performing and physical strain. Codeine, often in combination pills, would likely have been a go-to prescription for managing this type of chronic or recurring pain. But the body can metabolize codeine into morphine. The amount converted varies from person to person due to genetics, but this conversion contributes to its pain, relieving and sedating effects. Taking large amounts of codeine, or taking it very frequently, could lead to significant levels of both codeine and its metabolite morphine in the system. Like all topiates, codeine carries risks. Side effects include drowsiness, constipation, a major issue for Elvis, nausea, dizziness, and, importantly, respiratory depression. Even at therapeutic doses, it can slow breathing. At high doses, or when combined with other central nervous system depressants, like sedatives, alcohol, or other pobies, this risk increases dramatically. Tolerance and dependence can also develop with regular codeine use. Someone might need to take more and more to get the same pain, relief, and stopping abruptly could lead to withdrawal symptoms like muscle aches, insomnia, anxiety, and stomach cramps. The extremely high level of codeine found in Elvis's system post-mortem was a major red flag for investigators. It suggested either a massive single dose shortly before death or, more likely, the cumulative effect of taking very large amounts regularly over time. This pointed towards excessive use, far exceeding normal therapeutic levels. Why would someone take so much? It could be due to escalating tolerance where previous doses no longer worked for his pain. It could be misuse, seeking the euphoric or sedating side effects. Or it could be a combination of both, driven by chronic pain and the complex patterns of addiction. Regardless of the exact reason, the fact remains, a drug often perceived as relatively mild was present at potentially lethal levels. This highlights a crucial aspect of Elvis's situation. It wasn't just about which drugs he took, but the quantities and the combinations. Codeine in the amounts found became a major player, contributing significantly to the overall toxicity and depressive effect on his vital functions, particularly his breathing. It serves as a stark reminder that even commonly prescribed POBAs can be dangerous when misused or taken in excessive quantities, especially alongside other potent medications. Codeine wasn't just incidental. The levels detected made it a central part of the pharmacological picture at the time of his death. Number 2. Demerol, meperidine, the potent painkiller, given by incation. Demerol. This one carries a heavier weight. Known chemically as meperidine, Demerol is a powerful synthetic pulping analgesic. It's in the same league as morphine regarding its pain-killing strength, though its effects might not last as long. It was often used for moderate to severe pain, particularly after surgery or for acute pain episodes. How did Demerol fit into Elvis's life? Pain was a constant companion in his later years. Dental problems were severe and recurrent, requiring painful procedures. He had chronic issues like the impacted colon, glaucoma causing eye pain, and likely musculoskeletal pain from his physically demanding stage routines and weight fluctuations. Demerol offered potent, relatively fast-acting relief. Crucially, Demerol was often administered to Elvis by injection, usually by his personal physician, Dr. George Nikopoulos, Dr. Nick. Testimonies and records revealed that Dr. Nick frequently gave Elvis shots of Demerol, sometimes multiple times a day, especially during tours or periods of high stress or pain. Dr. Nick himself acknowledged administering Demerol, but often framed it as managing legitimate pain or sometimes using placebos. Getting painkillers via injection delivers the drug directly into the bloodstream or muscle, leading to faster and often more intense effects compared to taking a pill. This could provide rapid relief, but also potentially heightened side effects and a greater risk of developing dependence quickly. The side effects of Demerol are typical of strong toppiness: drowsiness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, sweating, constipation, and most critically, respiratory depression. High doses can significantly slow or even stop breathing. It can also cause mood changes, confusion, and sometimes seizures, especially in those with kidney problems or when taken in very high doses. Tolerance to Demerol builds rapidly. This means that over time Elvis would likely have needed larger and larger doses or more frequent injections to achieve the same level of pain relief or desired effect. This escalating pattern is a hallmark of opine dependence. Mixing Demerol with other central nervous system depressants, like the Valium, Quaaludes, Placidyl, and Codeine Elvis was also reportedly taking, is extremely dangerous. Each drug adds to the overall sedative effect, dramatically increasing the risk of profound sedation, coma, and fatal respiratory depression. It's like stacking weights on someone's chest, making it harder and harder to breathe. The regular administration of injectable Demerol signifies a serious level of medication use and dependence. It wasn't just about popping pills. It involved frequent medical interventions to deliver potent pain relief. This suggests either extremely severe pain, a high degree of drug dependence, or likely a combination of both. While toxicology reports after death focused heavily on the codeine and other drugs found in pill form, the history of Demerol use is a vital part of the narrative of Elvis's decline. It represents the heavy artillery brought in to fight his pain, administered in a way that carried significant risks. The reliance on injectable Tobies, managed by his personal physician, paints a picture of a life increasingly dominated by the need for powerful medications, blurring the lines between therapeutic use and dependence. The cycle of pain seeking relief through potent Tobies like Demerol, experiencing side effects, potentially needing other drugs to counteract those effects, like stimulants to fight drowsiness or laxatives for constipation, and building tolerance that required ever-increasing doses. This cycle was central to the health struggles of his final years. Demerol, particularly administered by injection, was a powerful engine driving that cycle. It offered relief, but at a steep potential cost to his overall health and safety. Number 1. Dilaudid hydromorphone. The heavy hitter opioid. If Demerol was the heavy artillery, Dilaudid was perhaps the bunker buster. Dilaudid is the brand name for hydromorphone, an opium pain medication that is significantly more potent than morphine. Estimates vary, but it's often cited as being several times stronger on a milligram-to-milligram basis. This is serious stuff, typically reserved for severe pain, often in hospital settings like post-surgical pain or cancer pain. What does it do? Like other Tobies, Dilaudid works by binding to opium receptors in the central nervous system, effectively blocking pain signals from reaching the brain. Because of its high potency, it can provide very strong pain relief, even with small doses. Why would Elvis be using Dilaudid? Given his documented chronic pain issues, the severe dental problems, the digestive ailments, glaucoma, potential back issues, and general bodily wear and tear, it's plausible that as his tolerance to other Tobies like codeine and perhaps Demerol increased, stronger mediquate relief, Dilaudid would certainly fit the bill if other drugs were no longer effective. Sources and testimonies, including those related to Dr. Nichopoulos, have suggested that Dilaudid was indeed part of the pharmacopoeia available to Elvis. Like Demerol, it might have been administered orally or potentially by injection for faster, more intense relief. The risks associated with Dilaudid are substantial, reflecting its high potency. Side effects are similar to other Tobies, but can be more pronounced. Extreme drowsiness, mental clouding, dizziness, constipation, nausea, and the ever-present danger of respiratory depression. Because it's so strong, the risk of accidental overdose is higher. A small error in dosage can have severe consequences. Mixing Dilaudid with any other central nervous system, depressant alcohol, benzodiazepines, Valium, barbiturates, other sedatives, Quaaludes, Placidyl, or even other POIDs, Codeine, Demerol, is exceptionally dangerous. The combined effect can quickly lead to respiratory arrest, coma, and death. Imagine the impact of adding this highly potent Tobi to the cocktail of other sedating drugs already found in Elvis's system. Tolerance to Dilaudid develops rapidly, meaning increasing doses are needed to maintain the same level of pain control or effect. Dependence is also a major risk, with potentially severe withdrawal symptoms upon cessation. The presence or use of Dilaudid, even if not found at the same high levels as codeine, in the final toxicology report. Reports vary on its specific detection or prominence at death compared to others. Represents the peak of the opulent escalation. It signifies a stage where extremely potent medications were being used to manage his condition, highlighting the severity of his pain, the extent of his tolerance to other pomies, or both. Think about the progression, starting perhaps with milder pain relievers, moving to codeine combinations, then requiring physician-administered Demerol injections, and potentially escalating further to using Dilaudid. This trajectory paints a grim picture of increasing reliance on ever-stronger substances to function or find relief. Each step up the Pobian ladder carries greater risks. Dilaudid sits near the top of that ladder for commonly prescribed pomazies. Its use, or availability for use, discs the extreme nature of the medication regimen Elvis was under in his later years. It wasn't just about taking a painkiller, it was about accessing and using some of the most powerful prescription pomies available, often in combination with a staggering array of sedatives and other drugs. This level of pharmacological intervention driven by complex health issues and patterns of dependence inevitably took a heavy toll on his body and overall well-being, contributing significantly to the decline observed in his final years.